You're listening to a Pop House Network podcast for developers by developers.
Welcome to Java OffHeap episode 81. Hey everyone, we've been taking a little break for summer just because summer is precious and it's warm. Well, it got too hot, but we'll dive with that. We got enough beer to cool us down at least. So for those who don't know or tuning in for the first time, my name is Freddie Guime. I'm one of the distinguished engineers here at Expedia, author, speaker, Java champion, and I'm here with my usual suspects.
Everybody, I'm Bob Paul, and I'm an independent consultant from Chicago specializing in JVM technologies. I'm an Apache Software Foundation member, Java champion, CJUG board chair, and conference speaker.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh Juno, Java developer, specific, I should say, to Jakarta EE, Java EE. I work with Oracle databases a lot, and I'm author, speaker, and blogger.
Hi, it's Michael Manella, Senior Director at VMware, responsible for the open source Spring team, author, speaker, Java champion, curmudgeon at large.
And before we dive in, wanted to thank our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring and analytics platform that integrates with over 450 technologies, including AWS services, Docker, and Kubernetes. Datadog's platform brings together metrics, traces, and logs in one place, so you can get full visibility into your environment and improve your application performance. With machine learning-based alerts, customizable dashboards, and distributed tracing, Datadog makes it easy to unify disparate data sources so you can troubleshoot faster. Start your free Datadog trial today. Listeners of this podcast will receive a free t-shirt once you install the agent and create one dashboard. Visit javaoffheap.com/Datadog to get started. Again, javaoffheap.com/Datadog. All right. So with that, we've been having a very, very fun summer. I did get to go to JCREAT, which is a conference in an European conference, or I guess, that's European. And got to meet a lot of like very interesting and fun people, and it was super, super fun. It's essentially a conference where you get together with some of the people that are trying to push the language forward and try to discuss what's coming up and what is exciting them now. Got to see Cliff Click, which was fun because he is like a very, very hardcore language author, and he was talking about the stuff that he's working on, which is I couldn't even create an opinion of it. It was just so much knowledge that the only thing I could do was just listen to him and absorb and try to take notes to later down compare, right? But yeah, so it was super, super fun. Who else was there? Oleg was there. Oh, Cameron Purdy was there. It was fun. He's staples in the Apache community. And everything he's trying to figure out what's trending, what's new on the different ecosystems. So that was kind of fun talking to him about. Also Martin Thompson was there, and he's more of the performance person, and kind of trying to figure out again discussions about what is important. Do people are really just creating microservices without looking at performance? Right? It's yeah, and he's kind of why, right? So it was super, super fun. We have a lot of discussions on that sense, but use that opportunity to just make it Crete is a beautiful island to go visit. I want to go visit again. And then make a jump to Europe and visit Europe for a little bit. And that's why I guess, we're being a little bit offline. We're being all enjoying it. I don't know what you guys have been doing.
Hey, that's just you, Freddie. And I mean, just to not even move off of JCREAT yet, JCREAT's kind of unique. That's one of the ones you have to be invited to go. So very exciting. Yeah. The other thing is they don't have a set schedule, right? There's no talks. Isn't it all just unconference?
Yeah. It's almost essentially you have to pitch what you want to talk about, and then there's a voting that goes in. But it's just like it almost like because of that, because it's a small invite only. They have the luxury of saying, okay, what is the most interesting for the people that are here, and you vote on that. So yeah, it was amazing. We should go. We're invited.
I know we have the open invite, but who runs that again? What's the and where is it?
Heinz.
Right. So I'm just I mean, I know the answer to this. I'm just asking just so our audience can kind of hear about this, because it's a very unique conference. So
Did you go for a jog with Heinz? He always has some great pictures of Crete on his Twitter, or X, I should call it.
Yeah. Dr. Heinz, like for those who don't know, he runs the Java specialist newsletter.
Yeah.
And again, his knowledge of the language is amazing. Like, if you get into his newsletters, he'll go into like this little corner of like things that you really thought you knew about the language, but he goes and explain it, like, open it up, like things that you never thought about. So yeah, like essentially, if you don't know about him, definitely search Java Specialist Newsletter. We put a link to the stuff. It's always great material to read. And I know he did say that he wanted to be part of our, part of an interview. So we need to figure that out too. So, right. But yeah, that's me. What about you guys? What have you been doing all summer?
working.
I don't believe that.
A lot of client work for me this summer. I mean, we did some vacations. My daughter is heading into her senior year, so college visits and all sorts of things. A lot of family stuff this summer, so I don't have a lot of good conferences to talk about. I'm hoping to go to some in the fall. I mean, so the Community Over Code conference for ApacheCon, that's coming up in October 7th through the 10th, I think. And that's happening in Halifax, Canada.
Nice.
Where I've never been to that far east in Canada. Yeah. So that's one that if I can find a way to get to, I'd like to get to. And then I just recently, just because I was looking at a couple of blog posts, and the JVM Language Summit just happening, and they started that back up, which is another invite-only conference for again, language developers. The Brian Getzes of the world are the ones speaking at that conference. So, I mean, it's kind of cool to see, like, again, we went through a couple of years where everything was kind of shut down and things were kind of ramping back up again. And I mean, this feels like the first year that not to say that everything's back to full strength again, but a lot of the major schools or conferences are coming back up and things are happening.
SpringOne is back.
Yeah, SpringOne when does that happen?
It's not next week, but the following week. So we're recording this on what's today's date? The 10th. So it's the 21st is when it starts.
Okay.
Yeah, it starts on 21st. So
soon.
In person in Vegas, baby. Tied in with VMware Explorer. So it should be good. We're excited.
Awesome.
And we have to do a toast for the conference that is not or the conference that has not been announced, so it's not going to be announced. Yeah. So yeah, we have not heard anything from Java 1. Well, there's no official position. I think it's just we know that it's probably not happening.
It's probably not happening.
I had heard that so Java 1, is not happening. I thought I had heard that their official stance was. Developers will always be an important part of the ecosystem, yada yada. They're welcome at Code World. But I thought I had heard some rumors around like they're going to do smaller regional events instead.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard about that, but I haven't been closely paying attention. They haven't just seceded everything to DevNexus yet.
They did announce DevNexus already for next year, right? That's April.
Yeah, which is a de facto like replacement, right? Like that is it's even when Java 1 was running, like Java 1 is definitely bigger, better. Well, no, it was definitely bigger. And I guess the one thing that Java 1 did have going on them is usually a lot of the Oracle engineers will show up for that one. But aside from that, like DevNexus is a much community driven. There's definitely the price tag is much more accessible, and you still get a lot of the same speakers that you usually see in Java 1. You get to see them in DevNexus.
And Freddie and Bob, you two don't stay in the Tenderloin for when it's DevNexus.
That's true. We stay in a nice hotel. No, I mean, so yeah, DevNexus. So April 9th through the 11th,
nice.
I think it says. And I mean, call for presentations isn't even open yet. Looks like they have that on the schedule for September. So keep an eye out for that September. And then it looks like they're announcing the CFP in November. So fast and furious, it's coming. So keep an eye out for that.
Awesome.
All right. So let's go with the news.
Yeah, so license changes. We've been talking about these a lot recently, it feels like.
Yeah, I think the first one was mine. Hashicorp today announced they are switching their license, like a lot of others. I won't say I like theirs, but it's probably the most palatable of anybody so far. So in the same vein of Mongo and all the other ones that you have an open source product and other people are basically ripping it off with no compensation for the open source project. Hashicorp has taken their open source project and basically reworked the license to say that you can do basically anything you want with it except for compete with us. As long as you're not competing with us, you're probably okay.
So how is that different from some of the other cloud licenses? Because so is that based on number of employees, or is it really just like your business? Like if you come out with, hey, I'm running a secret vault that's based on your source code, that's not allowed.
Exactly. Now, that being said, though, I think where this will get interesting is businesses evolve.
Yeah.
And so Hashicorp decides to get into a new line of business. How does that work?
Sure.
So I think that's where things will get interesting on that particular one. Full disclosure, I haven't read the actual text of the license. I just read their blog post. And that's how they put it. You can copy, modify, distribute, even build commercial products on it. You just can't compete with us. So that'll be interesting as HashiCorp's business evolves.
Yeah,
which is like you said, Michael, like a folded license, the business license, that kind of like one is like, okay, it's not bad, is it? Like I don't think it's.
Maybe we talk about this more in our discussion, but yeah, I mean, from my perspective, none of these new licenses coming out qualify as traditionally what the OSI has defined as open source licenses because they have restrictions, right? It's you can see the source with all of them. So, I mean, all of them have it, but how it's distributed and how, when you have to pay for it,
it's muddy.
That's a lot different than what we've seen in the past. And again, the economics has evolved. Maybe we talk a little bit more about that later.
There's becoming a divide between open source and open use.
Yes.
Like what you can do with it is their limits are being put in there versus just the source code itself.
Yeah.
Right. So next one is JetBrains release.
Yep, there's this actually is in JetBrains 2023.2. It's been out for a while, I believe, but the big thing that we wanted to mention was that this is introducing an AI assistant to help enhance your development with a set of AI-powered features. That's one of the big updates for this particular release. There are lots of course, performance enhancements and GitLab integration, user experience changes, things like this. But the AI assistant, I thought, was quite interesting because now you don't have to go out to the web to chat GPT to somewhere else. You can go right within your own IDE and start to get your assistant right there.
Two questions. Number one, so you're saying it works offline? So you pull the network, it still works?
That I don't know.
Okay,
I
don't know. Yeah, so that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, has JetBrains provided any transparency on what they trained this model on?
I'm not sure if they have. Unfortunately, I'm not really.
You're not a JetBrains guy, huh?
Yeah, I'm not really a JetBrains guy. Not very knowledgeable on what the AI assistant, is the underpinnings of it. There's a blog post. There's things we can read about it. I've not gone that far into it.
Yeah, no, from what he's saying, and I'm just going to quote, how do we handle your code and data? It says, when you use AI features, the IDE needs to send your requests and code to the LLM provider. So you have to phone home. In addition to the prompts you type, the IDE may send additional details such as pieces of your code, file types, frameworks used, and any other information that may be necessary to providing context to the LLM. In addition, the early access builds that include the AI assistance functionality perform optimum collection of detailed data about the usage of AI features, including the full communication between you and the LLM, both text and code fragments. This data gets strictly confidential, is used by JetBrains for product improvement purposes only. It's never shared with any external parties, and it will not be used for training any ML models that generate code or text or reveal in any form to any other users. The options could control detailed data collections can be found under blah, 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 blah. So apparently, it phones home to give you an answer, but from what they say, they don't keep that information and they don't train.
So the reason I ask is twofold. Number one, I know plenty of companies that are not okay with sending their source code to a third party, right? Or over the web. So the fact that this does that, I can think of plenty of just industries that this is a non-starter. They'll block it on the firewall. But number two, like GitHub got in a bunch of hot water with their code assist because they trained it down all the GitHub repos. Like, where did the code come from? This obviously was trained on something. What was the body of code that was trained on?
Yeah, and if there's an IDE that hopefully I don't think a lot of that. I hope it's not on JetBrains code, like JetBrains typing in code. But yeah, it's a question mark. It could be the same as the one in GitHub, but it does bring questions around also what is not the ancestry, but where did this code came from that you're suggesting? Right? Is it an GPL project where now suddenly I need to open source what I have? Is it really just generated? I know for a fact that GitHub Copilot, you can tell it. Look, if the code looks too similar to an open source repo, do not present it to me. So it's only based on generated code around what you have instead of copy or instead of being similar to code that it can be found on the GitHub repos. And they kind of do that to avoid that problem of you suddenly lifting code that people can point and say, oh, look, it's on this project.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And the thing I'm interested in with this particular AI is the documentation generation. Now we've got Java Doc, which is great, but this supposedly reads through your code, kind of, and then it provides a brief summary of what that particular method or code does. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Summarization is the sweet spot for most of these generative MLs anyways, right? It's the reason they were able to get one of these to pass the bar exam so quickly. Yeah, it's what they do. They summarize stuff. Yeah, that's what these things are really good at.
Yeah, I wouldn't be asking it to go help me write some kind of a method to do calculation which it probably would be better than me at. But I wouldn't be asking it that anyway. I'd be interested in the documentation part of it, and I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, no, and that part is less. It's less wrangly on how that is generated. So yeah, no, that's. Again, it's AI is eating up the world. So
it is. It's crazy.
I thought it was microservices.
Always something. There's always something on the horizon, right?
Skynet's coming.
Yeah.
All right. Next in the news, layoffs.
Yeah, I can't remember who added this, but the kind of the news here is employment and labor market continues to kind of tighten around tech. This one was specifically related to Northern Trust, which is a big employer in the Chicagoland area. 904% of their workforce laid off. So, we've been following this kind of since the beginning. We've kind of had a few episodes prior to this where we've talked tips, what to happen if you get laid off, or what are some things you can do to try to avoid it. Showing your value. The market is tightening. It's not 2021 anymore where everybody was getting a raise for free. It's kind of back to reality again, I guess. It's the easiest way to put it.
It's correcting, right? So
yep. So keeping an eye on it, and we'll see where that goes.
Yep. The next one is the Redhat sent us article.
Yeah, so this is one I threw in there, and it was kind of interesting, and it kind of aligns to a lot of the other open source changes we've seen, where companies have been contributing to open source. They've been releasing a lot of code fixes and patches and things into those open source projects, are now starting to kind of pull back from it. This is kind of a different angle than the licensing angle. So Red Hat is not talking about changing the license of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It's not changing the license of CentOS. They are changing what kind of stuff gets merged publicly and what kind of stuff they only send to their subscription users. And to me, like, my initial read on this, I was kind of shocked that you could even consider that, because your Linux distributions are generally they're GNU licensed. So you have this kind of expectation that, well, you can't just send patches to certain people and not others. But they've interpreted the license in a way that they believe that it is completely legal to do that. And I've actually read several articles on people defending this move and its legality, and people tearing it apart. So, not being the lawyer, I don't know exactly where this fits, but there are certainly arguments being made that what they're doing is fine. And it's another part of the open source economics where it's like, look, we have other people that are basically just taking our source, recompiling them, repackaging them, and selling them, and we're kind of sick of it. So we're not going to put everything out in the public anymore. You got to pay, and then you get security patches and things of that nature. And if you don't pay, there is still a community project that you could build on your own, that rebuilders could build on their own and send to people, but we're not giving you everything we have anymore. And that move is it's shaken up the Linux distribution industry a little bit, where now you have, some of the other articles, you have Oracle and SUSE basically forking these lines and saying, hey, we're going to continue to provide free support on our hard forks of these projects. So, the reaction is kind of things that we have seen in the past, like with Akka, as an example of something adopting a new license and people started to fork it. Elastic, you're seeing kind of like, well, you've got it licensed so that the fork is possible. And some company is trying to take advantage of the change that another one is making, saying, hey, I don't know if it's a holier is thou thing, or these are really, hey, we have the community in mind and we're trying to keep things how they were before. But it's a really interesting evolution. We've seen the license changes already, and now we're also seeing a company like Red Hat, which their entire business model is open source, starting to kind of pull back from, hey, we're just going to put everything out there and let the community do the right thing with it. People are going to pay us for support and everything will be fine. It's like, well, we're aware that there's freeloaders and we're reacting to it. Mm-hmm. And that the motivation seems to be the same thing, right? Even with the large Amazons and the cloud providers, where people are saying, we're putting all this code out there and people are eating our lunch, with competitive offerings, and we're not making the money that we think we should.
Scale matters. Like, this wasn't a problem when pre-cloud scale.
Yeah.
Now, so I get the right framework. So what Red Hat is saying is, look, there's this repo that has all the code for CentOS, right? And they're saying it's like, oh, but we also give you a binary that has patches in it. So you're welcome to download the binary that has the patches if you're downloading Redhat. But if you're a third-party repackager and you try to rebuild the source code that was on the repo, you are not going to get what the Redhat has as a download distribution, as a binary for the download distribution. Is this a true statement from what it is, or am I?
So I don't think it's just the binary. I don't think they're releasing all the sources. So you can't just rebuild it, right? Because they're targeting people that are going out the source repo and rebuilding and shipping that. That's where they feel like they're being taken advantage of. And again, GPL, this again could be a point of debate, maybe not. I'm not an expert at GPL. I'm more of an Apache guy. The way the license read, if you modify GPL and release it, it claims that you must release the sources to users of the modified program. They're saying, I believe what they are saying is if you are a subscription user, you're using the subscription version of the program, that it's not, you don't have to release it to everybody.
Yeah, we are releasing this to you. And then by the
keep in mind, when you have scenarios like this, I'm a paying customer and I'm buying support from you, and you're giving me private patches. I'm probably getting it from a different repository than I would regularly, right?
Yeah.
Because I probably have to authenticate. And so there's, they're not going to switch back and forth. They're not going to be like, oh, like I'll take the open source stuff while it's open source and then switch to the commercial stuff. Like they fundamentally are consuming a different product.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's the argument they're making. Is like, we can do whatever we want over here because it's not what we're building on that, but that's not what they're actually consuming.
Right. And that's what it feels like. So it's different than the licensing changes. It's just like, we're just not going to put it out in the public so you can rebuild it. We're going to withhold some of this stuff. And again, they're not withholding everything. It's not like, hey, Red Hat developers aren't allowed to contribute to it, but it seems like there are certain things that may be timely security fixes, things of that nature where they are not compelled to put it out in the public, where these, again, their argument, these rebuilders are just going to rebuild it and repackage it and make their own money off of it.
Now, that being said, though, I know that there have been instances of doing this kind of thing in the past with open source, and it hasn't gone well for those projects. Like especially something like Linux. Is Red Hat Linux that unique to swap from one to the other? Where when I think of the typical enterprise software, is it that big of a deal?
We'll see. I mean, so I think the game, like the chess match, is starting to happen, where you have companies, SUSE is forking it and saying, hey, we're going to stay committed to doing patches and see if we can bring some of those customers in and get their support from them. It's a gamble. And, the argument, hey, it's Red Hat's product. They can decide to make this change and do what they want. Whereas other companies can also do what they want. It's still GPL licensed. So for me to take it and say, hey, I'm going to push everything out there, I know that that's meeting GPL for sure. There's no question about that. So it's kind of, we're going to see. I know when we talked about Akka earlier, we we're like, well, this may not go well for them. We'll have to see where that ends up. I actually haven't followed too many of the Akka storylines to see whether people are switching to open source versions of that, or whether they're just staying on the old release, or where that is. That might be a good statistic to get for a future episode. But
it'd be interesting to see where some of the open source projects depended on Akka, like Spark and whatnot. Where did those land? I will be honest, I haven't heard a lot about Akka since they did that, so I don't think it's. I think it's probably definitely put a big damper on if it didn't completely kill off Akka from an end user perspective. If you weren't you're not building apps on Akka anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the OpenSearch versus Elastic thing. OpenSearch is still a very popular offering in AWS, and the open source project is still surviving. And then, yeah, I mean, but also you're not seeing Elastic going out of business either. So I guess the question is, are these companies seeing a payoff by taking these stance that where it is getting us money that we may not otherwise have gotten, where it's like the trend is continuing. So whether
definitely gotta be careful in the comparisons, right? Like
different.
Akka is very different from Elastic.
Yes.
Data products, stickiness. Elastic has, I believe, a decently well serving cloud offering that seems to be going okay for them.
Yes.
But like a framework is a different conversation. Believe me.
Just like the Linux kernel. I would put the Linux kernel closer to an Elastic where it's a full-fledged kind of product than to a framework.
My only disagreement there is data products have the ultimate stickiness because migrating from one data product to the next is hard.
Yeah.
Migrating from one Linux to the next, unless you're low level, like if you're running Java, like most of our,
it doesn't matter too much.
It shouldn't matter that much. It should be a relative. Like I don't see our community being like, oh no, Redhat's screwing us over.
Operations side though, like. Does your DevOps change? Does your deployments change? Does hardware change? I mean, yes, that I think there's a. I got
to recertify everything for I get that. No.
All right. So I know that we want to like hit these four before we go like full discussion mode. But so we keep them, and the reason we keep talking about it is because there's so many that are doing the same, right? There is an article from Oracle that it's here. Who put this one in?
Kind of already talked about this one and the next one, right? Because
is this part of the Redhat piece? Because that's the same under the same bullet. Because I mean, and it's actually kind of funny with Oracle because like the same company that like killed Open Solaris and stuff like that is like, no, we are committed to open source. Okay.
I don't think you know what that means, but okay.
Okay. But they're also calling out the same thing that, hey, Redhat is making this move. We are going to continue contributing. And you can, I believe, so I haven't looked at who the exact rebuilders are. I don't know if Oracle is potentially what Redhat would consider a rebuilder to say, hey, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. So,
oh my, yeah, like this is almost like it is a blast from the past. The SCO Linux all over again. But yeah, let's see.
Okay, Oracle Linux is a RHEL compatible distribution. So would not surprise me if Oracle Linux is a rebuilder. So a company being targeted by this move to say Oracle's being a freeloader, they're saying we're going to continue to support it.
Now that's an interesting thing in that I wonder if like these are big enough companies where you almost wonder, like, it's a negotiation or for something go sideways and like this is payback kind of thing.
Oh, they're just
I hate to be conspiracy theorist kind of guy, but like, right? I mean, like,
a backroom deal that went
of Java, went sideways,
and Google.
It's funny if like these players all use each other's stuff. It's such like they build businesses off of each other's stuff. This isn't just like I'm a consumer of Java. Like both of them have serious business implications. So, like, obviously, nobody on this call is somebody in the room, but it's just putting my tinfoil hat on for a minute.
No, I mean, but it's there are. I don't know if we're getting too much into the discussion, but like you could make the argument for OpenJDK. How many rebuilders of that do you have?
But that's by design.
It is by design.
Yeah, that's just the intent.
What Redhat is saying is that's not what we meant for Redhat Enterprise Linux.
That's not what we meant.
So we're gonna change that. But yeah, could that potentially change for Java at some point if Oracle starts looking at that and being like, hey, a lot of companies freeloading off of this stuff that we're just putting out there for free.
Yeah.
Similar license, it's GPL with class path exception. So you could potentially make similar.
There are already so the big difference I see with OpenJDK with OpenJDK is, there are a lot of people already supporting OpenJDK.
Right. Right.
I don't know, and this maybe just be my not being naive. I don't know how many people support Red Hat Linux versus rebuild it as their own and support their own. Those are two different things.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers on that either. And to your point, like OpenJDK was put out there with the intent that people would do that with it. Like I think I don't think Red Hat knew that people, oh geez, there's going to be people just out there that are going to rebuild this and not pay us for support, and we're going to lose out on money. Like I feel like Oracle at least had some idea that, hey, we're doing this with OpenJDK.
Yeah, it's intention.
Yeah. So.
All right, to go and then keep diving into the discussion. NetBeans 19. I think that's you, Josh, right?
NetBeans 19. Yep. Last time we had our podcast, it was NetBeans 18. That was a quarter ago, I think, a few months ago. So now we're on 19, and it will be released probably by the time this thing hits the air, I think within the next week or two here. And the reason I'm really liking NetBeans 19 is because we have lots of enterprise Java enhancements in this release. You know, of course, there are a lot of other. I want to say that the NetBeans community the NetBeans developer open source contributor community has grown substantially over the past couple of years. I mean, we have a lot of people contributing patches and doing very great work for NetBeans. It's really becoming, it's really nice to see, you know, now that they've kind of been part of Apache for a few years now, it's really starting to gain popularity and becoming an attractive IDE, I believe.
Yeah,
But an AI assistant.
Yeah, where's the AI, man?
Yeah, it's probably on the horizon. I'm sure somebody
Somebody must have. Yeah,
somebody's worked with it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, if you're going to be working with Jakarta EE10, you're going to want to check out NetBeans 19. Right now, in 18, lots of things don't work. And they will work with NetBeans 19, which will be out there soon. Lots of Java fixes, PHP, of course, web editor, UI changes. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot in this release. So you should go check out NetBeans 19. As of this recording, it's still in release candidate stage. You can go and take a look at the different changes in the GitHub log, but this will probably, like I said, be out. So go and get it.
Right. And then another one for you, Josh, right? Jakarta EE11 update.
Yeah, Jakarta EE11. Just a little update on this. It's coming, and it's definitely on the horizon. As of right now, I'm not 100% certain, but I think it's still targeting JDK 21. And the other thing that I'm not 100% certain on is what are the specifications going to look like that are coming into Jakarta EE11? We had talked about possible no SQL, no SQL specification. Not sure if that's actually going to make it into Jakarta EE11 now. Jakarta Data was another one that I'm not quite sure about. There's actually voting happening right now within the working group, and lots of people, you know, giving some really good reasons why some of these specifications may need to mature a little bit more, or may not really belong directly in the platform itself. So, you know, Jakarta EE11 is definitely shaping up, and it's something to keep an eye on. And yeah, we should be looking forward to seeing this thing. I'm not exactly sure on the release date of Jakarta EE11 yet, to be honest with you. I want to say it's early next year.
It was Q1. I don't know if it's
Q1. I don't know the exact date. Q1 of next year is all I've got right now, but definitely keep an eye on it.
All right. Yeah, and then the last two news items that I guess are going to slide into the discussion is the EU CRA. So.
Yep. And we talked about this on previous episodes a little bit with like Brian Fox from Sonatype when we were talking about security. And a lot of this evolved, again, out of the Log4Shell and a number of security vulnerabilities that have come back that have had broad implications for companies all over the world. government bodies are now reacting to this by trying to institute legislation to, again, the intent is good. They want to improve security of these products. The negative is some of the mechanisms they're using to do this could be very negative for open source. And that's what a lot of people in industry are reacting to, especially people that are very dependent and involved in open source software. So a number of the foundations that build open source software, Mozilla, Eclipse Foundation, the Apache Software Foundation, the Linux Foundation, I think I said the Eclipse Foundation. So they have all started kind of coming out with educational material for developers to be looking at to say, hey, these are the things that are under consideration right now that you need to be aware of. So, when I look at, the first article that I had thrown in here from Mozilla, they highlight some of the potential policies that when you read them, as somebody that works in open source, it's like, boy, if this was the rule, would I really be contributing to these projects? And one of those are, the CRA is essentially, they have a number of kind of almost bureaucratic like documentation and requirements, paperwork that you have to do for software being used, but where there may be vulnerabilities or audits, where you have some accountability for security vulnerabilities in your project.
It's putting in a full compliance regime.
A compliance regime. Yes, that's a better way to say it. But like the things that could hold people liable in here. So let's say, your project's open source and it's just for fun. Nobody's really using it commercially. A lot of that stuff is not going to get hit by this. But most open source developers are not like me and self-employed. A lot of them work for large companies, right? In fact, I think there's been statistics that like 70 to 80% of them are employed by these large companies. And some of the things in the CRA say, well, any open source project would be deemed commercial as long as committers are employed by a commercial entity. Well, that's like every open source project out there. And if
anyone you want to use.
No. That anybody want to use. I mean, they're depending on commercial developers that have a day job working for a big company. That's a lot of people.
So hold on a second, though. Does that mean if you're working on the code while you're on the clock, or if you're working on the code in your off hours, or does it not get into that?
Do you punch a clock?
Well, technically, no. Most people don't.
The reason I ask is because, I mean, like most employment agreements I've seen in our industry state that basically anything you create using their hardware is work product. Exactly. There's anyways. So like you can't use the off the clock excuse.
Right.
With a number of employment agreements.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the case. Now, whether that's always defensible in court, not going there, not a lawyer.
Yeah.
But
perhaps moonlighting clause, like at least I've signed a couple of moonlighting clause. So they still exist, but yeah, it might be a dying thing.
But imagine I am an employee. I work for a major company, and open source is important to me, and there's projects that I want to contribute to. And me saying that I'd like to contribute to this project means my employer may be liable for security patches or
the audit process.
The audit process now, that if I were not doing this work, they would otherwise not be responsible for it. It's already hard enough to get companies to sign, corporate CLAs and things that just blanket their employees to say anything comes out of this company that's open source is good. This is just, this could be a very big killer from, again, a very large portion of the open source developer community, where these employers are going to be thinking twice about setting themselves up for more liability.
I mean, you would end up having to structure, so all open source would have to go through foundations.
Yep.
And the foundations would have to be literally funding grounds for lawyers.
Yeah.
And they would be the only people with commit access.
And not every foundation is
every like the Apache Foundation would have to lawyer up, hire people just to be committers.
Yeah.
And then everything else goes through PRs, and only the Apache Foundation has commit access.
And we don't do this.
Yeah. Well, like that's where this would push that to.
Yeah. No, I mean that is the huge risk in that. And I mean the other bullet point here is the aside from the corporate open source projects receiving donations will fall under the strict rules. Like
take off all the buy me a beer and buy me a coffee.
Right. Now I have an audit that I have to worry about because I accepted donations.
I got to pay 10 grand to an accountant and a lawyer when somebody give me $5 on a buy me a beer thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we have an entire discussion to talk a little bit more about this stuff. There's not a ton of call to action. Again, like the role of most of these foundations is not for profits. They're to educate developers. We're going to put some links in the show notes that go out to some of these foundations that explain, hey, these are the rules. This is what the implications could be. And then, basically the only call to action, you can really give as a not-for-profit is if you read this and you think there's something wrong, go talk to your government agencies. So I know, in the Apache Software Foundation, there's a link to the MEP. So essentially the European Parliament members, specifically the ones in the IT committee. Talk to them, voice your opinion, make sure they understand, hey, these are the things that could negatively impact me as one of your constituents, and go out there. And while, this is legislation that's being considered in Europe, that tends to be an influence on the US, right? So things that happen in Europe, we look at, we say, is this working? Is this not working? If we're starting to say this stuff is working and we adopt these things, we could also be hitting a lot of the same implications of some of these rules coming out of the EU. So we'll put some of these in the show notes. Again, the ASF, I think, due to some of these legislative things that are coming out around software, it's funny because we've always talked about, man, there's only a legislative solution where we just solve this. It's a double-edged sword, right? So
this is not what we want.
Yes. So Dirk Billham, he's an OG Apache Software Foundation member. He's our VP of Public Affairs. He's got a blog article. We'll include that in there as well. But keep an eye on the legislation. Educate yourself. Figure out what the impact is going to be, and if you've got an opinion on this, make sure to let your representatives know that this may actually do more harm than good.
Yeah. And with that, let's slide into the actual discussion topics, right? And the first one is open source in 2023. And it's an interesting question because like the one thing I wanted to tee up is like, it's the question, is the great open source era over? Right? Like it feels that like I don't know if like actually I know all of you are part of the same age group as I am, where remember when there was no concept of IP rights on code?
Mm-hmm.
Like you will
remember that was right, because they were so strict.
In fact, I still have a T-shirt at home that I wear. Do you remember DECSS? It was the thing that decrypted DVDs.
Yeah, with a number, a number.
Yeah. So I have a T-shirt that has a Perl code on the front that implements that. So it will decode the encryption. And on the back is the law that it technically violates. This is a anti-circumvention device. Yeah. It lists all the things of why this. It's a T-shirt I bought back in college. Like, so no, IP has always been a problem in IT for my career.
But it was almost like, I think it was like not quite as like right now you're extremely careful. I don't remember being careful at all when, like whatever it was, like 25 years ago, like where it's like, oh, let me email you some code I wrote today. And it's like, oh, that's fine. Oh, let me just.
And I think that's, this is a broader topic, but discussion, but that's kind of the way that lots of things have gone. If you look at TV shows, lots of TV shows do things that in the past, like Seinfeld or something, you couldn't air that nowadays, right? And so if you go back to this discussion, back in the open source, you're doing things. Yeah, I remember back when I first started, it was like, man, I'm gonna submit a patch for this and put something in that. It was no problem. I didn't think twice about it. But now after hearing what Bob is saying and everything, you have to start thinking about it. Do I really want to contribute to this, or can I? And you have to get, approval from your employer to do anything.
I'm going to make a claim. It's not the golden age of open source. It's over the gilded age of open source, where it was supposed to be magic and supposed to solve all our problems. It was all altruistic. And Michael, we have a talk on this, about breaking into open source. And the reality is, though, that the underlying mechanisms of open source actually haven't changed. I think just the mentality that people had around it, that there's some magic solution to a problem. We're starting to realize that it's not magic. There is an economics around it, and it's not what people thought it was, right? There are cheat codes to it, where if scale matters, execution matters. There are people that can freeload in that environment. That can absolutely happen. Community health is a huge thing, but it can be exploited. Like, it's not a silver bullet, right, and it never has been. But we're finally at the point where we've had companies that have been in existence for a few decades with these open source models, and they've had it try at it, and they've probably come at it from that gilded, hey, this is magic sort of view, and they're also realizing.
I'm not even sure it's that. I think that there's as technology changes, so has the processes have to change as well. And open source worked in the way we think of it as a gilded age, yada yada. It worked in an environment where people ran their own data centers, where they ran their own computers, where you couldn't set up a service that millions of developers could consume all at once. The cloud era and that technology has fundamentally changed how the business model works. And so the processes around that have had to evolve as well. I think what we're seeing now is that it's not that open source is dead or dying, it's that it's evolved. I view this as the next step in its maturity. We're talking about, in our list around this discussion, the first one is economics. As somebody who, this is my day job, is the economics of open source. There is immense pressure to make money off of open source. We've seen this with Oracle with Java. We've seen this with obviously Red Hat, the conversations we had earlier. Hashicorp, Mongo with their license changes. Spring sees it on a daily basis. There is no free ride anymore when you write software. And so companies have to figure out how do I make money. At the end of the day, it can't just be a cost center.
And that's what it feels like to add to that, because it feels that at the very beginning when open source was being conceived, one person could be almost a de facto open source owner. You didn't need
a dictator. There's a word for it.
Oh, yeah, right. You didn't need hundreds of people. The projects were smallish. They were large projects, but at the scale that at that point it was smallish enough that you get Linus Torvalds that did all this stuff, and you get the Xerox Sparks, all this stuff that came out of that. It felt that at the very beginning when open source was starting, it's you can keep that model because it was one person or maybe 5 people that needed to contribute, and they did it because the goodness of their heart, right? But then like Michael said, I don't know. I think it's not. I don't know if it's a cloud, but essentially an open source project to be, and you can kind of see that split. If there's open source projects that's still maintained by 1 or 2 people, they're not even going to change their license. They're going to just keep the same place, right? I think the only ones that are considering this license change or these new models are the ones that, we hire people to contribute to this, and we have.
I don't think it's the number of people involved. I think it's the scale. I think that when you look at there are startups out there that are doing open source that haven't got to this point in the model yet because they haven't hit the scale yet. Once they do, I have no doubt that they'll go down the similar route. It's really around scale, and that's why I brought up the cloud, because that's what's changed the scale game. That's what has taken what used to be able to be. So company A ripped my stuff off and isn't paying me. But companies B, C, and D are, so I'm fine. Now all it takes is one company to rip me off, and Amazon, a Google, or Microsoft, one of those guys, I'm out of business.
Yeah.
Like I can't, like, that's enough. Those hyperscalers are named hyperscaler for a reason. Like the scale doesn't work that way.
The assumption was if I employ the committers, I am going to have enough internal knowledge that I am going to be able to out execute the competition. At the end of the day, a large cloud company, A, they can throw money and hire committers. B, they may have other people that are just very good at running apps at scale where it's like, hey, we're going to figure this out. And B, the overall maturity of open source, like compared to when I started my career, like every open source project I come into, I just build it. Like I don't have to read the instructions. It just works. Yeah. Where it used to be like, oh, you have to do this special thing and that special thing. Yeah. And there was a little secret, like tribal knowledge that you needed to know to run the project.
In college, getting Linux running on your desktop, like that was like there were clubs that you literally brought your desktop to there to figure that shit out.
We've gotten so good at this, and documentation has gotten better, and everything.
Yeah, everything's mature.
The learning curve to being able to get decent at a project, and this is a credit to the people that do these projects, it's low. And so if I'm good at scale and I have a company and smart engineers, even if they're not committers on the project, I might be able to deliver a product that can scale this thing astronomically and eat into some company's market share that is employing most of the committers for that project. And that's been, again, that's why I totally agree with you. The scale thing has really been the biggest game changer, whether you want to call it cloud or something else.
No.
That is the thing. Software scales infinitely. At the end of the day, the source is free. How much hardware and execution and brain power can you throw at it where I can make it economical and set a price point below the smaller startup maybe that is sponsoring the project for the most part.
Yep. I think the key word that Michael has already said is maturity. I mean, I really do think, back in the day, it was like when you were a kid, you're doing whatever you want to do. It was a free reign, wild west. And we've matured, we've grown older, and we've realized there are things you have to do. There's certain procedures you have to go through, and it's good to go through these procedures because you have to have standardization to make things work correctly and work for everyone. And that's what's happening with open source. I do think it's maturing. I know I said before it was, things are changing, and I do think that that's just the way of the world. The world is learning how to deal with change, learning how to deal with these new things. And we're maturing and dealing with it in a more responsible way. You have to, because look at Log4j. I mean, I'm not to say anybody is being irresponsible there, but we've all learned from that. Nobody did anything wrong there, but now we're all learning and we're growing and we're becoming more secure and doing things differently just because of that big thing.
I can't help but feel like, we're all talking about the state of our kids before we press record on here, right? Like Bob's visiting colleges, Josh has kids in college, Freddie has kids in college. I've got a 4-year or a 4th grader, and I can't help but feel like there's an analogy there where most of it, I'm not there yet, but most of the rest of this group has gone through the teenage years and entering the college years and the bumps in the road of that maturing process. I feel like that's where we're at right now. I feel like we're going to go through some tough times with regards to, there's going to be some dumb legislation passed. There are going to be some dumb license changes that are done in the name of trying to get things better. And we're going to screw it up. Like there's no good way to put it, or better way to put it. But I think that this is a process that we will, allow us to mature and get to a much better state.
Yeah, I agree.
Buckle up.
No, and I feel like because there is like what we see is like the two parts. First of all, like a lot of the provenance and almost like how do you make sure there's no bad actors, right? Because somebody making a mistake in a project is one thing. Somebody being malicious and suddenly in open source you have a big corporation using it. That's another thing. And on top of that, you have this I do want to keep paying people and I want to keep this company running, and now it's like the other models. I guess the other models that were tried, right? Like the support model, like this will always be free, but you can pay for support and you have exclusive access and all that. Like you said, there's this hyper cloud accelerators are eating that lunch away, and they're like, okay, we need to make money, right? Like so it's a we always feel taken aback when somebody changes their license, right? Like, because some of them seem to be, surprising in the sense that, and that was one of the assumptions. It's like, oh, once it's Apache, it's always Apache. And then, and nobody said that was the case. It's just, you think about it.
Well, no, I mean, I think so. If you were contributing to a license, which was super open, like an Apache license, which says all these contributions, I am giving this code to this project. You can sub-license it. You can do whatever you want with it. You can rebuild it. You can tweak it. It's all open. If I donated my time with that assumption, and then you suddenly change the license, say, well, I'm going to add restrictions and you didn't consult me. That's where I feel there's going to be some backlash. Now, again, we talked a little bit about the economics earlier in the episode. So, I mean, it's not that I don't understand why some of this change is coming in. The scale and everything makes it hard to compete like at that level with that. So, I mean, the licenses they're trying to be defensive about it, but as a developer that went in with certain assumptions, you just changed the game on me. And I think that's where a lot of the negative reaction comes from. Speaking as somebody that has donated code to projects for free.
Think about it this way. It'd probably be easier to avoid these license changes if I could just copyright my API. Nobody can copy it, right? It wouldn't be compatible.
Yeah.
Do not get any ideas.
You kill the patient, though.
I'm like, but seriously, like Mongo wouldn't have done their thing. Elastic wouldn't have done their thing.
Sure.
Because the clients still work, all the consumption stuff works. I'm not advocating for that in any capacity.
I understand.
but that's we're talking about bad decisions that could happen in this mature process. Like that's definitely
that didn't happen. I mean, there's clearly a bias for targeting the players at scale. Like again, every one of the new licensing changes. So you mentioned the business license where it's, hey, if you're competing with me, then we have a problem. A lot of the other licenses are at a certain scale. Yep. We have a problem.
Basically, the anti-cloud ones.
The anti-cloud license types. So I mean, they're clearly trying to tweak it, and they're smaller changes than like saying, "Hey, it's all copyright."
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
like which would have been like that's a hammer that you're just beating the hell out of it. These are actually small tweaks. They're annoying. Maybe at some point there is some sort of industry standardization around it. Again, like I may be a little bit biased. Like I still like the idea that, hey, I should be able to offer support, and then everything else is like the code is available and open, and you can use it how you want.
I mean, that model though is like any public company is under immense pressure to squeeze every last dime out of every one of their software products, and support only gets you so far.
There is a limit to the ceiling of that income. And that's what I feel like, again, Redhat, who IBM spent a ton of money to brought in and is looking for like, how do we recoup our investment? Yeah. That's what a lot of this stuff feels like.
I don't know why they bought them in the first place.
But and that could be the same thing for startups. Hey, we're trying to go public. It's time to like make sure we're making all the money we can. So I mean, the maturity of the open source model, like the Josh talked about, and the scale that Michael talked about, it's all kind of coming together at the same time. Where can we make more money? Where can we tweak things? And the license has become a spot. The support and what we're offering public patches has become a spot.
Both of those are when you look at what's happening, these aren't technology solutions.
Yep.
These are legal and business solutions. And that's what's going to keep happening is the business of open source is what's maturing and evolving. And
taking that
they aren't necessarily technologists.
And that's the biggest problem, because most of us developers and technologists are not good at this stuff, right? So I had ideas. We've all had ideas of things we wanted to do. Mark Zuckerberg had an idea of what he wanted to do. He never thought he was going to end up where he's at today with all of the legalese that he has to go through every single day. The people at Google, all these big companies, that's, this technology stuff. It's just, it has really grown into a huge profession for the legal industry. They've got their arms around this whole new area in this tech space.
That's okay. Like if you repackage this podcast, you have to pay us some dues or something. We still have a tip jar. That's as far as we went, right? But like, what I want to know is like a crystal ball, right? Like, all right, let's say that what is going to happen, right? Like, I imagine like there's going to be a new normal. Like, oh, I need to use some open source software and I probably need to pay some money for it if I use it commercially. Like, is that okay? I think, like it's that like 10 years or 5 years from now, I guess that's 5 years from now. Is that something that's going to be normal, right? Like we kind of do for closed source, like, you get your version of Windows and you buy your laptop and you have to pay for that. So we kind of do those things. We just never done it with open source. Is that going to happen? And is that going to be okay?
Maybe we go around the room and just kind of make some predictions. I mean, we're like at a mid-year type of thing. So, so my thought on this, the spitball where I think crystal ball is going is, and maybe this is whimsical, is my hope, is it's actually probably more the Redhat model where maybe there are certain things that we don't publish publicly that we keep as an open core where, hey, this is an open core and we're going to put something value add on top of it, because that is a model that I have seen that has been successful in open source. I think the jury is still out on these anti-cloud licenses. We're going to see where that ends up. We're going to see if you still keep the community that you've had, you keep, the dedicated people that are going to be like, hey, we need to keep using this product because it's open source and, it lets us do what we want. I think you're probably going to see more of the, you know what, we're going to keep this secret little thing inside and we're going to release this to the general public. And if you pay us, you get the secret sauce. If you don't, you get an open source product that works, but maybe is lacking in some certain way. That's my prediction.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that last point wholeheartedly. I think that is what I've seen a lot of people or a lot of industry going into, where they've got some open source product. They will provide additional features, nice features, or they'll hold back those really, really nice features from the people that are not paying. And it seems, it's in my opinion, that's okay, because these people are obviously running an organization, an industry, and a company. They need to make money. And if you are dedicated to that product and you want those features, you're going to pay, and you'll be happy to pay. There are certain products that you can go to. Let's just say you go to the App Store, whether it be Google or Apple. Most of these applications are very cheap, but there are some that are quite expensive. And if there's something I really want to use, I'll pay for it. I can tell you, I pay subscriptions to a couple of applications because I really do like the applications. Are there open source, or I shouldn't say open source, other alternatives to these things that I could use for free? Probably, but I think when it comes down to it, that last scenario that Bob mentioned is, from what I see, going to be probably the biggest key going forward. Some companies are going to have open source, but they're going to give certain things for the payers.
Mm-hmm. All right, Michael, I'm hanging to your every word.
So I do think that the open core model definitely has legs. I think that is a model that is going to find success in open source in general. We've already seen it, so it's not a surprise. It's not a secret. I do think that it will be interesting to watch over the next 5 years. I personally don't view this as open source is open source is open source. I think that in order for this to be practical long term, there has to be an understanding of your audience and the understanding of where you sit in that stack. And so infrastructure, operating systems, messaging and data systems, application servers, like that infrastructure layer plays a very different role than, say, application framework. So when we compare, paying for Kafka versus paying for Akka, those are two very different conversations at an enterprise.
Yeah.
And I think that those will have to end up with different business models. I think if we just lump open source all together into one, I think that will we will probably end up with a business model that works for infrastructure and will completely choke off everything else in the stack. And that's obviously in my part where I sit in the stack. That's a scary thought. But like I feel that that's where we have to get to. It's very similar to how I feel about standardization, right? Standardize your infrastructure, standardize, how you talk to your operating system, standardize, protocols like HTTP and JDBC and those kinds of things. Does it make sense to standardize an MVC framework? Does it make sense to standardize a batch framework, which guilty? I mean, like that's that understanding where you sit in there impacts your business model. Like the guy who made the engine does not have the same profit margins, everything else that is the guy who built the car. And people need to understand how that all works. So when I look over the next 5 years, I hope that's the realizations that happen, and the understandings and the appreciation for both. Like there's also, like I said, the chance that, people say like, well, one makes money, one doesn't, so just screw it. Like that doesn't help anybody. So, or makes enough money, however you want to word it. But so I hope again, I hope this is a maturing process that we will get wrong, we will have bumps, and we will all make mistakes. But hopefully, we all produce just like we all want to produce good contributors to our society with our kids. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, with these business models, we find a mechanism that works for all levels.
So yeah, it almost like feels that you're talking about there's the open source diaspora where like at the beginning everything is under the open source label, and it's like there's now a need for kind of like split that up a little bit and say like depending on what you're doing, you might need to adopt this business model, but that doesn't work if you're in a different part of the estate. And yeah, like for me, I think I really don't have like a lot more to say to this story. What I think like in 5 years, what's going to happen is there will be some productivity gains. I do believe that from using like this AI machine learning tools, and that's going to go back into all right. There's a productivity gain.
I see lawyers coming down on that shit hard. Like I'm just waiting for those court cases. Like we started off watching Google v Oracle or Oracle v Google. Like there's going to be a case that we're going to watch just as hard. Like that's
and we will be here. We'll be talking about it. But I think that it'll go through that essentially birthing process, right? Because I think like now everything has to go through one of those. But I do believe like it's too good. It's you can't just close your eyes to that. So I think there's gonna be definitely a gain on productivity and efficiency on that side. And I think that then there is going to create a space for saying, okay, we're fine paying for these things because we want to have those models. We want to have that spin up. And actually, if I think about it, like that is kind of like the next part, as you're saying, like, oh, what about if I give you AI trained autocomplete that is very expert on the framework that we produce, right? Like some kind of like, oh yeah, you're paying for the for the support for this particular framework. Here is also an ML train on that for you to be more productive on it. You know, just because you're paying for the support, right? Like actually, that's pretty cool. I want 5 cents, Michael. 5 cents.
I think you gave Michael 5 cents for the Spring model, but anyway.
If I got the 5 cents when it comes to the Spring model, I'd be a happy guy.
Oh my gosh. which is just Michael saying like, oh, this is how you should do batch. Like it's just train on Spring batch.
Michael Spring batch model.
Yeah.
And with that.
Oh gosh. All right. So I think this is a good place to stop. I think like we said, you know, it's money doesn't grow on trees. Or on PR pull request merges. So you know, and I think this group is I believe we're not purists on like, oh, it must always be free. We understand that there is such a people and like, you know, they need to support their families or the kids going to college. So they want to be paid. So we understand that is going to be like the new reality. But I think that yeah, like with all the new accelerations that are coming and stuff, it might be like a wash in terms of the companies. Like it's not that they have to spend more money. It's just they save some here, they spend it over there. So it's fine. Like I think we don't know what's going to happen. Like we said, we're predicting things, but I don't think like, you know, I don't believe there's a doomsday of open source. It's mostly like we're changing, we're moving on, we're maturing, and we've seen this happen already like 5 or 6 times. And I think we're going to be fine. There's going to be stupid laws, and then they're going to make them disappear after a while, or either that, or we're going to have that cookie pop up all the time saying like we're going to use cookies, and then you got to click OK, even though you never click no. So, and that's it. And with that, we're done with this episode of OffHeap. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is Freddie signing off.
Bob signing off.
Josh signing off.
This is Michael signing off. If you follow us on Twitter, check us out. I'm sorry. Yes, X. That makes me sad. So if you're on X, check us out at OffHeap. And if you're following us on YouTube, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe.
You know, I'm being ready for the new LL models that we'll put in our store. All right, we did it!
Yay!